There we go. So thank you very much for having me, everyone. I'm really, I'm glad that we've managed to sort the technical challenges. But my name's Nick. As we said, I'm the sales engineering director for a company called Arctic Wolf here in the UK and Ireland. You may have known me from other organizations. I am not a die-in-the-wall security person. I am an infrastructure technologist. I work for organizations such as Dell, Nimble Storage, if anyone in the room is a Nimble customer. Did a lot of cloud technologies as well, and Arctic Wolf came knocking around about 18 months ago to set up the UK and Ireland business. I'm here today to, like I said, kind of give you more of an insight to what we're seeing in the real world behind the scenes. And it was an absolutely brilliant discussion from Microsoft, from a global scale, from an attack surface, and what we see from a nation-state actor. And then now I'm going to give you some kind of tips and tricks that we see from our SOC and our incident response, and maybe some tips and tricks that you can take away today. So we all know that the industry has completely changed. Post-COVID, cloud technologies, cloud migrations, the list goes on. We don't keep data now inside of a wall perimeter. The perimeter doesn't exist. Data now lives pretty much everywhere. We've got remote workers, we've got cloud technologies, we've got 365, we've got Microsoft Azure, we've got SaaS platforms. Most of the organizations that we work with are not in the business of running IT. IT is there to help run the business. And so therefore, the plan is to migrate to as many SaaS platforms to deliver applications versus running them historically on premises. And the final one is, the challenge that we've all got is, yes, nation-state actors exist. Yes, absolutely, this is true. And yes, absolutely, malware is a really, really key problem. But the real problem that we're facing, ultimately, is we don't have the people, we don't have the staff, and we've got too many alerts and too much noise. So the challenge that we're now facing is we've spent the last 15 years adding tools and adding products into our kind of internal environment and buying tools and processes to allow us to monitor our cloud environments. But it's just really hard to hire good security people. And we all know that. We all feel that pain day in, day out. And so the challenges are, as the attack surface changes and balloons, we're still trying to monitor in the historical way. We might be using SIEM, we might be using a tool to try and do it. But that doesn't get us to the root of the problem. It doesn't get us where we need to be. The average security team triages about 11,000 alerts a day. That's a lot of alerts. That's a lot of noise that we've got to try and figure out, is it real? Is it benign? What could it be? What should it be? But more importantly, how do I respond to that alert? It shouldn't be just a password reset. Maybe it's user education that I need to think about. So in the UK, the challenges that we all face here in the UK is exactly the same worldwide. We face a global shortage of talent in cybersecurity. That's a real thing. We know that ransomware is going up exponentially year on year. The NCSE triaged 3 times more incidents in 2020 than they did in 2019. In 2021, they triaged the same amount in just 4 months of the year. So it's something that this is not going to go away. We might see it ebb and flow as attacks change and as kind of focuses change, but this is something that we're all living with day in, day out. Now, a really interesting pain that we're seeing across all of our customers is cyber insurance, because historically, organizations have relied on things like cyber insurance in order to make sure that they can get coverage, or to make sure that they've got the cyber coverage that they need should they be breached. And so most organizations and IT teams like ourselves have gone to the board to say, we think we might have a gap here, but the board has said, well, if we buy cyber insurance, I don't need to buy the thing that you're telling me about. Now, conversely, all the organizations that did that then get breached. And what happens now is the pain that we're feeling, just like our insurance in our cars, the premiums have gone up. They've trebled, actually, roughly 37% this year, and that's a compounded 33% increase from last year. And what's happening is ransomware payments are now stripped out of the policy. So even if you did have your cyber insurance, if you did try and claim for the ransomware payout, they wouldn't pay it. So now it's all pointing back to controls. And the reason why the premiums are going up is because the cyber insurance companies are not willing to be the last line of defense. They're going back to organizations saying, you should really be doing MFA. You should really be doing air-gap backups. You should really be doing logged and monitored networks. These are things that we should be doing absolutely day in, day out. The good news is that allows us as IT to be able to go back to the board and say, this is how we fix the problem or the pain that we feel from a finance perspective. So you can have those conversations with finance and say, I can help reduce that, or I can help negate this by doing things in cybersecurity within the business. Now, a talk track of mine today is going to be around vulnerability management. And that's not because I'm passionate about vulnerability management. It's a real pain that we all feel because it's something that you can never complete. The problem with vulnerability management is most organizations and nation-state actors, and even ransomware as a service script kiddies, are using things like zero-day attacks, and they're using kind of vulnerabilities available in kind of commercial software in order to be able to access your environment. So yes, it's password spraying. Yes, it's things such as business email compromise. But the other way that they get in is just by, you might have a vulnerability that you haven't patched on the Cisco VPN, and that allows the bad actor in. Historically, we've always done vulnerability scans sporadically, right? We've done them maybe once a quarter, maybe once a year. You do a pen test once a year. But the problem is, if you're not doing them continuously, you end up with a huge gap of visibility because you don't know what you don't know between the times that you do vulnerability management. Only 15% of UK organizations today do continuous vulnerability scanning. Most organizations do monthly or quarterly, and some I speak to aren't doing vulnerability scanning at all. So I'd highly recommend this is something that you should put on your radar to maybe beef up or improve. Anyway, so we've seen some great coverage about the types of attacks that we see, and I absolutely back that up. Ransomware as a service is a big thing. What happens is a script kiddie or maybe someone that's opportunistic would try and breach your environment. Then they sell your details and the breach on the dark web to a cybercrime organization that then take it and then exploit it for kind of cybercrime means. Business email compromise is an attack based on your email, and that's where you've got people doing impersonations. And this is where you hear the terminology of smishing and vishing and phishing. So it's not just on email, it's phone calls, it's text messages, it's WhatsApp. It's many different types to try and manipulate an end user to try and get something out of them. And then the final one, like I said, this zero-day exploit. This is the real thing that we're starting to see more of in the real world today. So a very, very quick thing about Arctic Wolf. Now, when we started, the organization started back in 2012, and the founder of the organization is from a company called Bluecoat, who you may remember from many, many years ago. And he designed this technology, which he then went to the VCs to get funding for, and he created a technology called FogFlame, and his vision was to be a cloud-connected, simple-to-price, shared infrastructure security technology to deliver security as a service for the mid-market. That's what he came out with in 2012. If you think about it, in 2012, we were using on-prem servers and storage. You were probably doing VMware projects. You were probably buying a backup refresh. You may be moving to ESX4, if everyone remembers vSphere 4 and all those good things. He had the vision at the time to believe that we were going to be a cloud-connected company where technologies were going to converge, and ultimately we needed to supplement that with people and processes, and it wasn't a tools problem. And that was the original idea and the scope for the company. And it just so happened that prediction came true because of how the market moved. And in fact, he did a podcast recently with one of our venture capitalists. And what really moved the needle for Arctic Wolf was the ransomware attack on the NHS. If anyone remembers that one, that was the real first one that we saw that made the national news. And that was the thing that kicked off the whole ransomware kind of as a service and ransomware experience, and then it's just kind of ballooned from there. Anyway, so just to give you a bit of background behind what we've built, so we're a people company. We're not a tools or a technology company alone. We're a people company because we need to augment tools and products with people and process to deliver things like incident response and to deliver threat intelligence 24/7. You can't really see it on the screen, but today we're not a small and medium business. Whilst we're small in the UK, we're kind of growing aggressively. But in the United States and Canada, we're the market leader in what we call security operations. So today we've got over 500 security analysts. But more importantly, the key thing for us is all about staff retention, because security people are massively in demand, and they're paid very high wages to be able to move from one organization to another. And for us, it's all about people and retention and how we deliver it. And the global locations that we service from our security operations centers around the world, and we have a local platform location centered in Frankfurt for data residency, compliance, and regulation for European and UK customers. But this is what you need to build a SOC. If you're thinking about building a SOC, or if you're thinking about, hey, what should I do? Where should I go? What should the project look like? This is a slide built from one of our SOC leads in America. So let's build this out. I'm going to go quite fast because I'm pressed for time. But ultimately, the first thing you need to do is you need to monitor what you have. And you might have heard of a term called SIEM, Security Incident and Event Monitoring or Management. And that allows you to bring disparate telemetry together that you can build machine learning rules to kind of spit out an alert. You ultimately then have to either deploy that in the cloud or on premises, and you have to take the sunk cost of doing that. You have to feed in the log sources and get them configured. You also then have to build the rule set, and then you have to put user behavior analytics on top. That's the first part of what you do with a SOC. Then we need to start thinking about what intelligence do we put in. So you start going, well, do I need external intelligence? Do I buy internal intelligence? Do I subscribe to different types of feeds? And interestingly, when you look at threat intelligence, less is more. The more you have, the more noisy you are, and sometimes it's duplicates, it's false positives, and it also might not be relevant to what you're doing. You also need to have endpoint detection and response. So you might see things like CrowdStrike or Defender or Sentinel-1 or Sophos, and the list goes on from an endpoint protection perspective. You need network monitoring, so you need maybe a Darktrace, or maybe you need something else like a Vectra or a Paolo. And I can keep going on because ultimately all this feeds into is human analysts, which you need 24/7. A SOC cannot operate on machine learning alone. You need humans to be able to see through the gray part of a black and white kind of decision point to understand if it's real or if it's not. And that's where your analysts come in. They all need playbooks, they need training, they need retention, they need pay rises, they need, am I doing okay? My dog's died, or whatever it may be. How can I help with that? So you need to have coverage, and you need to have career progression as well. And that's just the monitoring part. And that's the challenge when we start thinking about security operations. That's just doing the first bit of security. You then need to think about what we do around incident management and the processes of incident management and the responses and the cyber insurance. You need the playbooks that feed into case management. So you need some sort of automated case management or manual case management to make sure that you can ticket this. You then need to have the orchestration and response platforms that come in. And then you start building in, am I doing the right thing? Have I got the KPIs configured? Am I looking at the right thing? How have I responded to the threat? Have I responded to the right thing? Have I missed it completely? What does it look like, and how can I be accountable to fix it? Vulnerability management is a real key thing. And the challenge with all of this is this can never be a one-time thing. It needs continuous innovation and continuous improvement. So you have to keep on innovating. So whilst this is a multi-million-pound project to implement on day one, you need multiple millions of pounds to keep on implementing it and keep on tuning it over the many years that you run. And that's when you see things like pen testing, red teaming, breach protection, and everything that comes with it. And that's where your risks come in, to help you make sure that you can maintain the gap and make sure that you can fix it all. Everything I've just laid out is what Arctic Wolf does. As a service, as a single, easy-to-buy, user SKU, server SKU cost point. And that's the beauty about everything that we do here, is that you don't have to start thinking about what product should I buy, what SIEM should I buy, what technology service should I buy, how do I continually innovate. Arctic Wolf take the complete ownership of the security outcome to make sure that you can deliver the requirements that you need. And that's why I think it's really, really cool, because it's not a product discussion. It's more of a how can the service augment the business to make sure that you're delivering the outcomes that you need. And to give you some stats about, there we go, more things to click on. Hang on. There we go. So to give you some stats about what we have behind the scenes and just the scale of this thing, it's ridiculous. So for us, we're analyzing about 3 trillion security events per week across 4,000 customers. That's an awful lot. We're doing roughly 8,500 phone calls in our installed base. These data sets, by the way, are about 6 months old. But per customer per day, we ingest about 85 million raw security telemetry observations. And that's just a staggering amount of information that we're bringing into our platform. We use machine learning to essentially help us get to the 90th percentile to make sure that we can look at the interesting events and then the incidents. But then everything else that happens below needs to be human-led. It can't be AI. It can't be AI close a ticket. It can't be AI go do this, go contain this, go remediate it. Because you need the human element to understand what the real attack could be and what the impact of the organization could be. So, the top things to learn from real incident response. These are the 4 key takeaways that I'd love for you to kind of think about today from our side. We have an incident response part of our organization. We acquired them they're called Tetra Defense, and they're wonderful. And they're available in the US and Canada, not here in Europe just yet, but they're only involved through cyber insurance. And the cool thing about that is we're working with customers that aren't Arctic Wolf customers that call their cyber insurance carrier once they have a breach, and we can then help remediate, respond, forensics, get up and running. And there's 4 areas that we see common around the breaches and the ways that we can help protect you. The first one is just lack of resources of human beings, because normally the tool fired the alert, you just didn't have someone looking at it or understanding what that alert meant. And that is a real thing that we see day in, day out. The tool typically picks things up, but if you're triaging 11,000 alerts today, how on earth do you know what's real versus what's not real? The second one is external scanning. You need to be able to do external scanning on your public-facing IPs and domains, and also things about dark web scanning as well. Because if an external scan can highlight that you've got a vulnerable WordPress service, or maybe an exposed RDP port, or maybe even an exposed Cisco vulnerability or the Exchange vulnerabilities, if that external scan can see it, so can the bad actors. So if you can shut those down proactively, the bad actors can't see them, and that's a really easy way that they get in. Cyber insurance is important, absolutely, and I've covered that. But the final one here is not many organizations today have a real incident response plan. They kind of think, yeah, if it happens, I'm going to call this person and maybe they'll get in, but what happens if that person's on holiday? Or what happens if the person's not available? What happens if they're asleep? Is there someone else that we can call? Do we need a third party to come in to help us with this? How much would they charge us? Is there a bucket of hours that I need to think about? At what point do they come into this? So you start to require an incident response plan should you be attacked. So that's one thing I'd like to kind of have on your list today. Go away thinking what would be the run book or what would be the rule set around an IR plan in our organization for various attacks. So we get attacked an awful lot. Just like Microsoft do, we absolutely do as well because we're a security company. We use Slack internally for our communication, and I took off some pictures here that we could see from what we get from a smishing attack. So we get phished on SMS an awful lot. Our CEO is called Nick Schneider, and we get attacked an awful lot based on urgency and requirements of a CEO to do something in the organization. So here I've got an example. Hello, Sarah. Let me know if you got my text, Nick Schneider. And if it's a person that doesn't really know that it might not be him, you're going to respond back with, well, what text? And now he's got the ability to have a conversation with you. This is another one that we had, and I actually had this one, which is, hi, this is Nick Schneider. I'm at a conference right now, and I need something urgently done. Please text me back so that you can take action for me. And that's all about creating urgency. So whenever you see smishing or vishing or whatever it may be, it's typically a bad actor trying to present urgency from someone senior in the organization. And if you work in finance, if you work in marketing, or if you work in payroll or whatever it may be, you might not be cyber aware as much as what we hope that you are. And so when you get a message from the CEO where it says, you're at a conference and I need something really quickly, you go, I might have to do that. And so you then take the action and you don't really tend to follow up and, hey, call him back. Everyone now responds on text. It's always going to include something out of the norm, much like gift cards or whatever else it may be. Or it might be another thing that we see an awful lot, which is attacking the finance company because we're going to lose potentially a deal, and you need to send a wire transfer to this brand new bank account, otherwise we're going to lose the deal with this third-party organization. That's another tactic that we see an awful lot. And that's how we see the breaches, the business email compromise, and the data access. So that's how attacks start on our end that we see. And then how attacks start on another thing is kind of like security by chance. And this is a bit of a tongue-in-cheek thing. It's kind of late in the day. We are so used to buying products. And, as human beings, we like the new thing. Who here, show of hands, who here has the iPhone 14? There must be some people. There you go, thanks, Anne. Yeah, some people have got it. Who here is an Android person? Who here has the latest Samsung? Or who here has the latest Google Pixel that we're seeing on TV? We like to buy new shiny products or new shiny things. Sometimes the product sounds great, and it does something, but it doesn't actually protect us from everywhere else in the organization. And the marketing's just so good that I think I need it. It sounds great, and it's going to come into it. But actually, what real use is it doing around my entire security posture? The other thing that we see an awful lot is people, have a desire to buy things, and so they end up coming up with all sorts of various reasons to try and put a purchase order in for a specific technology or product, right? We're all victim of it, and marketing people are really good at exploiting that. So that's another area that we see within security and the attacks, because whilst we think that we've bought something to protect something, in reality, it's not done that, and there's another way of exposing. And that other way of exposing, as we can see from our Q1 incident response analysis, what we've seen is a complete shift of attacks. And that shift of attacks has moved away from traditional phishing, vishing, all that good stuff, and it's been based on external exposure of public-facing vulnerabilities. So it's things like Hafnium, Exchange, it's things like SolarWinds, Log4j. It's just stuff like products that we haven't patched. And these are the real actual kind of incident response root causes and how we saw the initial exposure come in. So in Q1 and Q2, Exchange Server Proxy Shell was a big thing that we saw. We see Log4j in VMware Horizon. Log4j was that period of time just before Christmas where it was a pretty bad couple of weeks for all of us. That isn't exposed as Log4j, it's exposed as a vulnerability typically in VMware Horizon View or other vendors. And then the other thing that we see, we just see remote ports of RDP open on the public internet. And that still happens today. And they happen because people did that maybe through COVID to let people work, and they forgot about it and kind of just left it there, and then we see it be exposed as a point of entry. Now, business email compromise is absolutely not to be played down. And actually in Q2 of this year, which is kind of like May, June, July for us, it accounted to 34% of all the attacks that we saw. So what am I saying here? What I'm saying is attackers change their tactics. You do something, they'll change it to be something else. You can't just go, I'll do this and it will fix this, because they will always find a way around. And that's the challenge with security operations. 80% of those business email compromise technologies didn't have MFA enabled, much like what we saw from Sarah at Microsoft. And then 23% of those was due to password reuse, insecure passwords, and then dark web kind of data leakage that we saw there. Anyway, so the trend that we see is opt-in security. So things like, would you like to switch on MFA? Would you like to switch on this? Would you like to switch on this? That makes BEC easier. My wife works for a food manufacturing company, and all of the C-suite pushed back when IT tried to turn MFA on because it makes their life harder. And she had to tell them, no, this is a really good thing. My husband works for Arctic Wolf, and this is why. And they were like, yeah, but it's made my life harder. Do we have to do it? And the irony is the C-suite are the people that are being targeted. And that's the downside to where we are as an industry. Anyway, on the interest of time. So what should we do? And it's not about what I buy, it's what should I do? Because the more tools that we have in place today, the harder it is to detect an attack. And that's the real kind of thing that we see day in, day out. We see organizations now with upwards of 20, 30 security products or tools, all firing off alerts, but the challenge is it's really hard to see between all of that signal to find out what the noise is. And that's where we see marketing really kick into their own. And you might have seen these words, these three words, XDR. from many vendors in security, because the challenge with XDR right now, or even security, is everything is converging as a central point of management to try and give us the global view of the attack surface. So we're seeing many endpoint vendors now talking about XDR. We're seeing many network vendors now talking about things like XDR. And so if you're looking at XDR, or if you're thinking about XDR, it's important to weigh up what XDR actually means, because it means completely different depending on the vendor you talk to. And that's the downside to it, because there is no standard. So if you talk to a vendor and they tell you about XDR and how wonderful their XDR is, that's great. But normally, that XDR typically means that you have to use their EDR, their endpoint protection. And that ultimately means that the endpoint protection vendor is all they're trying to do is trying to stay relevant as the attack migrates out of the endpoint. The attacks aren't on a laptop anymore. They're happening in the cloud technologies. They're happening in kind of access management. They're happening in other technologies around. So we see this around vendors and native XDR because it's all about lock-in. It's about trying to lock you in for a 3 or a 5-year term to make sure that you can't buy anything else. And that's where you start feeding in the other types of telemetry into the endpoint to be able to get that visibility. That's not what we're about, and that's what we're trying to change in the industry, because really XDR is about having a cloud platform that brings all that data in, including EDR, but it shouldn't rely on that EDR vendor to be able to get the telemetry. And that's the important differential between what a native XDR versus an open XDR really should be in the industry. So it's not just about the endpoint, it's about everything else. Now, here are some stats. Now, I'm sorry for the back of the room because it might be a little bit of an eye chart, but the reason why I'm showing this is these are the real incidents that we've responded to and that we've categorized in our SOC based on what we've seen from our customers in 2022. Last year, the majority of the attacks that we were responding to were network or endpoint based, and we saw 50% of the share of the attacks being on that side of the coin. This year, it's only 15%. You can now see where the other distribution of those attacks could be. It's geo-based attacks, it's identity-based attacks, it's infrastructure as a service and SaaS as a service, because as we adopt more cloud services, the challenge with cloud is it changes regularly. And if you're not keeping up with the various changes and best practices in a cloud provider, that's where you find the misconfigurations and where you find the gaps and where the bad actors attack. So, I was very, very lucky to sit through a presentation with a lady called Hannah Fry last week. It was at a legal event in Allen & Overy in London, and Hannah Fry was talking, and she's a PhD mathematician. She's a lecturer at many universities in London. She's also on Have I Got News For You, and she does some really, really clever things, and she's got a great book called Hello World. Highly recommend reading it. And her talk track was all about that we shouldn't be trusting machines and machine learning to solve all of the problems and all the challenges that we have within a business. And what we're in danger of right now, we're in danger of over-rotating more towards AI, machine learning to try and fix a lot of our problems. But that can only take us to some place because humans need context. And the business is all about context. There is no black or white answer to a ransomware attack on a certain type of incident or a certain type of machine, because we need to know how it's happening, when it's happening, but also what is the impact of that attack within that machine or that organization. It requires human judgment and human knowledge to be able to mitigate that. And so she spoke about some things around AI and machine learning, and some of the notes that I took were, uncertainness is guaranteed because the universe is truly random. And so their data analysis tools and machine learning can never absolutely be 100% accurate. And you need humans to be able to kind of second guess and make sure that the machines are doing the job that you need. Models will never give you the end state. It gives you the direction that you need to go. And that's important because as we start looking at wide ranges of data and wide ranges of analysis, you need human beings to tell what to do and what action should be taken. And the other thing that I find quite interesting is all about that over-rotation. We're now becoming susceptible to an automation bias, where we don't trust the humans, we'd much rather trust machines because we think machines are going to be right or better than what we are. But the problem with that is machines don't have context. And no matter what we tell them or what we teach them, it can never have the context as to what we truly do within IT or within the business. That's not to say that AI is wrong, but we need to be very cautious and we need to be very careful that machine learning is a great tool in our arsenal, but it doesn't solve the whole problem that we're facing within IT. And if you're a Simpsons fan, you may remember this. It's one of my favorite episodes of The Simpsons. If you think about it, the whole work from home thing and everything that was going on, they were quite, forward-looking, should we say. In fact, you could probably say that for a lot of things. So it's really good for automation. It's really, really good where you want to take a break and you're away from your keyboard, for example, and it's really good to help you with that, but it's not good for what the construct or what the context is for the wide-ranging businesses and technologies that we need. So, wrapping up. So how does Arctic Wolf help with this? Well, as I've kind of told you about today, where most organizations right now are, we're down here. We're building tools, we're buying products, we're doing a cloud migration, we might be doing zero trust networking, we might be doing endpoint protection, we might be looking at XDR. But really where we need to be is the resilience space. We need to be up here thinking about compliance, about insurability, around incident response, around proactiveness, and that's the gap that we see in security today. And with Arctic Wolf and our technology stack and the service wrapper that we deliver, it's all around how we deliver that as a concierge service. So to very quickly kind of give you a little bit of a pitch about how we work, it's all about broad visibility across a wide range of vendors and technologies that you're using today. A security technology should not force you to rip and replace the products you use. It should be able to harness that, it should be able to complement that and bring that data into a technology stack. It can't just be endpoint. It needs to be network, cloud, identity, and the human element to bring it all together in one place. It shouldn't really just be a SIEM. It needs to be a log monitoring, a log forensics, log analytical technology. And that's what we've built in a cloud platform, which is a public cloud-based. But it's all about aggregating that data for the wider good. It's all about building machine learning models through a technology called Arctic Wolf Labs. So if one customer anywhere in the world has an attack, every other customer is protected at scale at the same time. So you shouldn't be iterating the same cases and the same incidents against various different customers. You should be able to see one incident and then roll that out to protect all other thousands of customers. And then it's all around how to deliver that back as a service, because most organizations want a service delivery. We want SaaS subscription technologies. We want OpEx rather than CapEx. As we move more into the interesting world of the recession and the downturn that we're going to see, we're now going to see more organizations go, how can I add this in as a service, and how can I consume that when I need to? So, cyber insurance. With cyber insurance, there are many, many controls that you have to do. We can see that from multi-factor authentication, from tested backups, from vulnerability scans, protected networks, endpoints, monitoring of networks, hardened device configuration, and incident response. If you want to get compliance on your cyber insurance, and if you want to reduce your cyber insurance premium, that's what you have to do. And just take a minute to think about how many of those are you doing today. How many of those are you confident to be able to say to the organization, yes, we have this, and yes, we can do it, and where could your gaps be? And what we'll do is we'll send these slides out afterwards, and you can take this and take that one away to go, where are we going to be? And just to highlight where Arctic Wolf helps you, that's just a list of where we directly impact and where we indirectly impact and help strengthen what you do. Cool. All right. So there was an awful lot of information. I appreciate you giving me some time today. If there's one thing that you do, being attacked or being breached or having a data attack or whatever it may be, it's a when, not an if. And that's the sad thing about everything that we're facing today. So you need to have an incident response plan. Have something documented that people have access to. Don't keep it on a shared drive that you need a password for. You should print it out and have many people have ownership of that. Or you should have it in their document folder, or it should be somewhere local to them. And make sure it's documented, and make sure you test it regularly. That includes things like disaster recovery, it includes cloud failover, it includes running services, and then document the lessons learned and iterate what you need to do. But know how fast things happen. It's not a case that it takes weeks or months to be attacked these days. Attacks happen very, very quickly, if hours, if not minutes. So make sure that you know how long things take and what the SLAs or the SLOs are to go and do that. All right. Well, look, thank you for having me today. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. My name is Nick Dyer. If you want to come and see us on the booth, we're around the corner. But it's a pleasure to speak with you, and I wish you a great day.
Thanks, Nick.